Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you the top 5 books that I read this winter. So basically the setup of this video is that I'm going to read or tell you guys the books that I read each month and then their rating. And at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you my top 5 of the whole season. So without further ado, let's get started. So in December, I first read Before the Devil Breaks You by Liv Bray, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And then finishing out the month, I read The Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. In January, I first read A Wrinkle in Time, which I gave a 1 out of 5 stars. The Last Letter from Your Lover by Jojo Moyes, which I gave a 2 out of 5 stars. Stronger by Jeff Bowman, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. Uprooted by Naomi Novik, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Red Rising by Pierce Brown, which I gave a 1 out of 5 stars. In February, I first read By a Curse and a Charm, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. I then read Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. 1+1 by Jojo Moyes, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. And The House at Riverton by Kate Morin, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. So the first book that would definitely have to be within my top 5 is Before the Devil Breaks You by Liv Bray, and this is the third installment in the Diviners trilogy, which is essentially a series that takes place during the Roaring 20s in New York following diviners, which are people that kind of have supernatural powers, either being they can touch an object and know its history, heal people, kind of shoot fire, and all this. So this was the third installment, and I don't want to give too many spoilers away in terms of kind of the general plot of the third one, but I love this book. I had the first book really creeped me out. It was super freaky and I loved it. In the second book, we kind of got introduced to some new characters and just I didn't really enjoy it as much as I did, so was a little hesitant going into this one because I was like, I don't know, the first book was really good, the second book was, you know, not the best, but I loved the third one. It was a very big book to read, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was really well done, and there's so much character development in this one in particular, and the author does a really good job at kind of shedding light on kind of the darker side of history at this time, whether it being the eugenics movement, racism, and her author note. I'll leave a link to my review on Goodreads down below where I kind of talk about her author's note at the end, where she kind of related to kind of the mindset of people at this time, and just kind of with immigration, racism, eugenics, and how we're kind of seeing that come full circle now in just kind of the political climate that we're in. So I really enjoyed that, and her author note was really, really moving. And yeah, it was just, there was a lot of parallels that I could draw to our world now, and I thought that was really, really interesting, and I'm really excited for the next one because so much happened at the end of this one, but there was a big gap, like a 3-year gap between the second and third book, so I don't know when the next one's gonna come out, but I'm really excited for that one. The next one was the Tales and Teacups book club pick for December, and it was The Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna, and this is essentially a story about it's like a very unique story. So basically it follows a family that has 2 grown daughters, and the mother is very cold and distant, so when the father, who was kind of like the linchpin of the family, dies, everything goes into chaos, and his dying wish was for his wife to tell the daughters of one of her fairy tales that she tells. So it kind of goes back to the fairy tale story that takes place kind of before and during the siege of Stalingrad during World War II, and the daughters soon realize that maybe there's more to this story that meets the eye, and it was just incredibly moving. My heart broke reading this book, and I think it's a really unique World War II story because it is told, it's told from their perspective. It's almost like magical realism in a sense, but as the story progresses, or the fairy tale progresses, it becomes more and more realistic, and also because it is kind of the siege of Stalingrad, I think we don't get a lot of literature around that, so it was really interesting. It was incredibly moving, and definitely one that will stay with me for a long time. So next would have to be Stronger by Jeff Bowman, and I read this book in January and I really liked it. I'm gonna be graduating with a master's in orthotics and prosthetics, and this this was totally up my alley, and it's basically a memoir of the guy who lost both his legs in the Boston bombing and just kind of his experience with all that, and it was really insightful for me. Hopefully I won't have to like have patients that go through such a traumatic experience, but it's a good it was good exposure for me, and seeing kind of like the patient's perspective of all of like these new things being introduced to them and how I can learn from that. So it was really good. The only complaint I did have was that it was very rushed. So I was like, I did find, he even says in the book that like the publisher or the editor was basically telling him that people are going to lose interest, so you have to like write this book now. So it only chronicles like the first 4 months after the bombing, and then we get a flash forward 6 months later. I wish it would kind of went a little bit longer following that, but other than that, like, it was a really insightful read, and it was really, really impactful. Next, I then have Uprooted by Naomi Novik, and this is one that's been on my shelf for years, and I finally decided to pick it up, and I'm very happy that I did. It is a standalone fantasy story following a girl who gets chosen to be kind of the sacrificial one. So every year in this village, the dragon, which is like the lord of their like area, chooses one girl, and she's the one being chosen in exchange for protecting the kind of the town from the wood, which is kind of like a dark forest that is slowly kind of gaining power, and it possesses people, and people walk into the forest and never come out. So it's what I think was really unique. I did find aspects of it to be very confusing, and I had to reread a couple parts where I was just a little bit confused, but it was really unique, and I like that it's a standalone, so like you're just committed to the one, which I really enjoyed. But it was a really unique fantasy read for me, and it was one I was hesitant about because I heard so many things about it, and so I was a little bit hesitant going in. But other than that, like, it was just really good. I highly recommend it. I'm trying to be as vague as possible because going into it I didn't know too much about it, and I think that's the best way to go into this book, is just kind of knowing as little as possible. And lastly, I have The House at Riverton by Kate Morton, and so this is the Tales and Teacups book club pick for January and February. So I am a huge Kate Morton fan, so this is her actual debut novel, which I haven't read yet, and I think I read this at the perfect time because I just finished watching Downton Abbey, and this one kind of has a Downton Abbey vibe where it follows a woman named Grace who is near the end of her life, and she's approached by a filmmaker who is making a movie about the events that took place at Riverton, specifically the death of a poet who committed suicide, and the only witnesses were the two sisters that lived there. So this is kind of like Grace's confessional narrative in a sense, where she's kind of talking about her time at Riverton, where she was a housemaid and later on a lady's maid, and just kind of the clash between the downstairs world and the upstairs world, and how everything kind of led to the alleged suicide of the poet. And I really like this. This author is very atmospheric, and I could picture myself in this world, and it was just amazing and incredible. And if you're a fan of Downton Abbey, I'm pretty sure you will like 100% love this book, and I like ate it up. And just, my only complaint was that some of the characters I felt were one-dimensional, and I never was really attached to a lot of them. But other than that, I really enjoyed it, and it was just a fun read. And if you loved, like I said, if you love Downton Abbey, this is the book for you. So that's it, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books or what were your favorite books this winter. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.